Hi, and welcome to Conductor, where we are two sisters on a mission to amplify women's voices on the podium.
Join us as we interview leaders in the field of choral music, share resources, and build a community for current and future teacher conductors, all while exploring the gender divide. I'm Kira Starr.
And I'm McKenna Stenson, and we are
Conductor. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Conductor. We are so excited to have Moira Smiley on with us today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. So excited.
For those of you who don't know, we want to give just a little bit of background about the wonderful Moira Smiley. So here we go. An active composer and performer, Moira has written commissions for ensembles such as the LA Master Chorale, Conspirare, Cincinnati Vocal Ensemble, Mirabai, ACDA, Choral Directors Association, and countless others. Her arrangements and original compositions for choir, especially those with her signature body percussion, are performed by millions of singers around the world. The European premiere of Time in Our Voices was performed by the voices and mobile phones of Ars Nova Copenhagen under the direction of Paul Hillier. In 2018-2019, Moira released the album and choral songbook, Unzip the Horizon, a companion to her The Voice is a Traveler solo show.
She continues composing and improvising in collaboration with artists in film, video, game production, theater, and dance, and her work can be heard on feature film soundtracks, BBC and PBS television programs, NPR, and on more than 70 commercial albums. Her most recent premieres include her secular liturgy, The Song Among Us for Cincinnati Vocal Arts Ensemble, and Keep On for Vocal Essence. Her current projects include Utopias for Voices and Strings and a retelling of Ovid's tale of Narcissus for mobile phones and voices.
Well, welcome, Moira. We're so excited to have you here today.
You're amazing. I can't believe you just read that whole thing. It was like, a lot of information, some of which is interesting.
Well, we absolutely are thrilled, like we said, to have you and excited to know more than just what is in the bio. So we're going to dive in.
Great.
We start our podcast with the same 3 questions every time, Moira. And the first one is, would you just tell us a little bit about your upbringing and how you came to choral music?
It's a great question. So I started being in choir when I was really young. And that was sort of standard choir. We would sing Haydn and Handel and that was my children's choir. And then also I went to an alternative school and started singing folk music fairly young, and also musicals and that kind of thing. And so by the time I was 11, I was very serious little pianist, and singing was just a joy and something that felt very connecting to other people. And so I ended up in this community of singers, which is pretty unusual, called the Village Harmony or the Northern Harmony. And they are really known for traveling the world and exploring folk music, especially folk polyphony, so polyphony from other parts of the world that has totally different harmonic structure and rhythmic intentions and that kind of stuff. So music of Eastern Europe, of Corsica, Sardinia, Georgia, traditions from American, folk music like shape note music. And so it was this background, and also some Western classical early music that was sort of what I was steeped in when I was young. So I was quite a weirdo by the time I was 18. And so I went to music school after, for piano, actually. That's what got me into Indiana University, and continued my studies by singing early music there. And so I would say, and then started an a cappella group in college. And that's sort of the path that I've continued, is the academic side of things and my love of unusual, out of the way music, combined with, this classical and folk these two streams that touch each other actually across millennia. Yeah, that's what kind of where I'm at.
Oh, wow. That was such a beautiful answer. I feel like all of the things that you just said about your influences can be heard in the pieces that at least I've done with my choirs and heard of yours. And as someone who enjoys pop music and country music and hip hop,
Yeah.
it's really always refreshing to hear somebody who's so prominent in our field talk about the connection and how there's so much more than
Mm.
just the classical canon, and there are a lot of connections and roots that are at the center of what we perform. And it's so
Yes.
important to remind people that people like to sing, and
Yeah.
we should figure out what music they that draws them in and then go from there.
Oh,
So I loved that.
thank you for saying that. That's so important as we go forward. Yeah, so important.
And you described it in a way that I've never heard someone say before, which I thought was such a great analogy of being steeped and thinking about tea and bringing out the
Hmm.
different flavors and the way that our influences from our youth and our childhood have the impact that they have, and
Yeah.
how we can help bring that out in others who come into our spheres.
Yeah.
And not say that this is the only way, but let's find this collaborative way.
Yeah. I love that you put it that way. And I do think of it as a mixture, a blend. And the most exciting music is that blending, you
Yeah.
know, with just so much respect across, you know, the across the differences.
Yeah.
Mm.
So you've talked a lot about your upbringing and how you ended up at Indiana, but was there an event or a sequence of events where you knew, I want music to be more than a hobby and a passion? I want music to be my career.
That's a great question. There isn't for me one event, although I think what was so influential to me was that I had a, a exposure to traveling and music that I think a lot of choirs do. You know, as teenagers, often you'll go on a big trip and you have that sense of camaraderie with one another, and you're going and performing in really unusual spaces. I mean, new to you spaces, say in Europe, or and you have this sense like, wow, this is the happiest I've ever felt. I feel complete belonging and excitement. So that was, I think, that was a big influence, and there was this sense that that was going to keep being possible if I worked at it. And yeah, so I guess I'd say that right now.
Hmm. Well, I think a lot of our listeners can relate to that feeling of just being fully immersed in somewhere different and feeling not only the sense of community with the singers around you, but also just that kind of sense of reverence and awe of like, oh my gosh, like this is incredible. Like
Yeah,
other people need to know about this.
exactly.
And
Yeah,
I think that that's a feeling that is not always easy to trace back to a particular place, kind of like what you were saying, but you just keep coming back to it and you keep being reminded of, oh,
yeah.
there's so much emotional intellect in
Mm,
music, and it's inspiring to
yeah.
humans.
So well said. I love that. Yeah.
Oh, so, our last question for you, Maura, to kind of dive into just who you are and a little bit of background about you is, do you have anyone in particular who was helpful or influential in your journey to get to where you are today?
Oh, thank you for asking that. I so believe in acknowledging your mentors and ancestors. Um, I think there are two people that come to mind. The person that really drew me into the the professional world of choral music, in that I learned to create scores in my 20s, um, and that I didn't have to give arrangements away. I could actually um, put something on a website and sell it, and that kind of whole infrastructure was from Malcolm Dalglish. And Malcolm Dalglish, what lives still in Bloomington, Indiana, and I met him when I was there as a student and started working with him, and really he and his wife Judy and their daughters really took me in as a family member. So that was very important. Um, yeah, in so many ways, an important way to grow up. Before that, I would say um, another kind of alternative but very powerful vocal leader was a man named Larry Gordon. who is based up in Vermont, uh, recently tragically passed away, but um, really from that side of things, that was the first time that I saw somebody put together a tour with a small number of singers and make a great big great sound and travel it all over the world, and learn to be deeply respectful of whatever tradition you're singing in, and try to find the deepest way of approaching that. So I guess Larry Gordon and Malcolm Douglas are big choral influences for me.
That's beautiful. And I think such a great segue actually into some of our main content that we'd like to ask you about today. And I think that many of our listeners would agree that when we listen to your original compositions, um, I almost feel like I'm looking at a tapestry, sort of this woven intersection of all sorts of musical cultures and influences, like you already started to talk about. And so, can you talk about how this process sort of comes to fruition for you and how that began? And then, as a second part, how did you begin going beyond that into addition of body percussion and some of our cellular devices or things of that
Mm,
nature? How has it expanded for you?
yeah. So I think the central tenet for me has been that bigger, setting the bigger table, musically, stylistically, with your craft and respect, that you approach all music with I guess an honest, um, heartfelt approach. And that tapestry that you're hearing is, I guess, this early idea that all traditions are equal, um, and that I want my listener to feel moved, like almost physically. Um, an early motto that I had was, I want to make a thinker dance and I want to make a dancer think, so really good lyrics, but also this the soma, the body is responding as well. So it's not just the intellect responding, it's the body, whether it's to groove, or usually it's to groove, or a sense of surprise, or the counterpoint is so good that you just feel it, it makes you move. Um, so then I guess that led me out of the academy and into exploring how I could make that happen in the groups that I was leading and also in the compositions I was making. So more and more I wanted to get away from that correctness, that I certainly appreciate coming up through, and finding a new way of being authentic. And so I think I've been in pursuit of that ever since. Yeah.
The way you just talked about being grounded and being in your body and feeling your music, it absolutely comes across. I think immediately of your ACDA performance, where I think there were like some extreme technical difficulties happening.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
I remember like you just took the stage and I was just captivated by you immediately. And then you started
Mm.
singing and I was like, I'm at a rock concert. Like I am at I'm in DC, I'm 16, I'm at the 930 club. Like I'm
Oh.
like it was more than just the traditional, which is I feel like exactly what you were saying. And it shocked me to hear that you were a piano performance major, to be honest. I mean, and also it speaks to your intellect as a composer, because you
Mm.
can tell that there are very, very challenging and um, intense and purposeful decisions being made that are musical beyond just this is cool and it feels good and sounds good.
Right.
And so I was shocked to hear that, but then at the same time I was like, no, but it makes sense because because this is how she did this. And now she's
Yeah.
just expressing herself outside of the realm of the box,
Yeah.
which is
And
so cool.
I also
Thank
think
you.
there's something, you talked about the groove, but I also think there's a visceral
Yeah.
element that sometimes comes from your music that, as a treble voice and as a woman, when I was in high school, I didn't get to bellow. I didn't get to yell.
Yep.
And Oh my gosh, what a life-changing moment. And that ended up, we saw that performance right before the world shut down. That was the last performance. That's the last live music that I
Wow.
got to see for years. And I listened to Bello, I think almost daily in the pandemic because I just
Oh my
needed to
goodness.
feel that, ugh, and like
Yeah.
I wasn't
Mm.
happy. I would needed to have a earth
Yeah.
connection. And I'm just
Wow.
filled with gratitude that you are bringing that into the sphere of choral music.
Oh, Kenna, thank you so much for saying that and for that story because it's exactly my story too that I feel
Mm,
the need for that but didn't know it for a while and but it just comes out when you start to try to do something new and I would also like to add that my own life was changed by touring for several years with a band called Tune Yards, and Tune Yards is a pop band, and was traveling very kind of all over the world. And there is a sense in their music that is, um, to me, a new version of what some of the old polyphony does, which is
mm,
it takes you out of the formal and the proper and uses music in service of a ceremony or exactly like grounding yourself in in a moment where you need that or using another part of your voice that isn't coquettish or seducing or pious, but just uses more of your voice, maybe because we need to be in contact with um all of life when we
right.
sing, I feel.
Mm.
And so she was helpful for me to see a way forward or kind of a link between, say, a Bulgarian lament and the future that I wanted to write for.
And now, a quick word from our sponsors.
This season, we are featuring a fierce lineup of women composers found in the Music Spoke marketplace. At Music Spoke, composers receive the majority of the proceeds from sales, retain control over their own works, and all scores are available immediately as digital downloads. At Music Spoke, they do not simply publish pieces of music. They find composers and give them the tools and freedom to promote themselves. You just heard Hope Lingers On by Lisa Schneckenberger, arranged by Andrea Ramsey. Check out Andrea Ramsey's works today on musicspoke.com and conducther.com/sponsors. And we're back.
I love that you just said the future that I wanted to write for. And that makes me think we keep circling back to ACDA. And for our listeners who don't know, McKenna and I met Moira for the first time with our mom when we were all at ACDA Southern in
Right.
2020, literally as the pandemic was unfolding in the United States. So
Yeah.
these are some of our peak memories in our lives. Will probably live with us for a while. But
Amazing.
I remember the performance of I Have a Voice when Sandra
Mm.
Snow was conducting.
Oh, wow.
And it was just an electric moment for me where I felt I had already like things going on in my personal life and I felt angry and I felt sad and I
Yeah.
felt like what's happening and in that moment when I heard that piece I was like yes, and I
Yeah.
got back and I immediately paid it for my treble chorus and I was like listen up, this
Yeah.
is what we need, like let's go. And I remember us all just sitting in my dark classroom watching this YouTube video of the performance, which someone illegally probably took on their
Yep.
phone. So
Thankfully.
yes, for real. Um, And I was like, you don't even understand. Like, now just imagine this is like 10,000 times the
Yeah.
experience just in your body, in your brain. Like, and imagine it's surrounding you, because that's our power. We
Yeah.
can do this.
Yeah.
And so I so appreciate you writing those pieces, and I've programmed so many of them, and
Mm.
my students sang refugee during the pandemic, and
Oh,
it's
great.
just, there's really good stuff in there.
Yeah.
As you know,
Yeah.
because you wrote it.
Well, I don't always know, actually. And I think that thank you for
Mm.
saying that. And I, I as refugee rolls out, for a while, that was the thing that I wanted to sing the most personally, because I had been um, helping in refugee camps, volunteering in refugee camps in 3 different countries over the course of 3 summers. And I saw how vital and tender and vulnerable human hope is, and music is so being such a part of that, to bring us together. Um, and it's, of course it's cliche, it brings you across together across languages, but this was like, I feel like I got to witness something, and I'm sorry to be a downer, but I think there's going to be just more and more of that. There's displacement happening for people all over the world, and unfortunately, I don't think it's going to get better before it gets worse. And so there was that sense of music outside the concert hall doing its job.
Mm.
Um, and so I want to be part of that. Yeah.
I can affirm, sorry, Mechanize,
That's
you're
okay.
thinking all
You
your
go ahead.
beautiful thoughts. I can I can affirm that that is happening, and I have felt, as an educator, empowered to bring the messages of your pieces, whether they be pretty transparent or whether they be a little bit more symbolic in nature, to young people. And I think that that is something that probably everyone listening to this relates to, because that's why we love music, and that's why we love teaching,
Yeah.
and that's why we love having a room full of people and being like, we can do better, and
Yeah.
we get to do better. And I think it's so special to teach your repertoire to our
Mm.
choirs for that exact reason, because you do feel like I matter, you matter, and what we do together matters, and it makes
Yeah.
a difference. And
Mm.
um, I agree. I think there's more hardship to come. And I think when we sing pieces like this, and if we can associate that for our students with a concrete, how do we make it better?
Yeah.
Mm.
Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Then that's where the real magic happens.
Yeah. I agree.
And now, a quick word from our sponsors.
Hello, this is Sandra Snow, Director of Choral Programs at Michigan State University and Artistic Director of Mirabai. Mirabai is partnering with the Denver Women's Chorus to present Storytellers, a workshop unlike any conference you've been to. For the first time, leaders in choral music education will partner with members of GALA, the Gay and Lesbian Association of Choruses, to bring a workshop that blends the experiences of musical activists and classroom trailblazers. The Storytellers Conference is designed to improve your rehearsal and ensemble leadership through sessions that promote inclusive pedagogy, cultural responsiveness, and a new lens through which to view the conductor's role. Featured guests will include composer and singer Moira Smiley, and all attendees will be able to see Mirabai in concert. Session presenters will include collegiate educators from across the country and gala chorus leaders who are working as community activists. When we come together to listen to one another's stories, we all grow. Storytellers. Listen, connect, expand. To register, see storytellersdenver.org.
And we're back. And I think too, there's a million directions that we could go, but to bring it back a little bit to you and this process of starting as a piano major, taking this new exploratory tapestry intersectional approach. So then I have a question about writing all of these ideas down
Mm.
in a way that is approachable for choral ensembles, because when we hear you live, at least my first instinct is, how do I do this without
Yeah.
a loop machine? How do we do
Right.
this without a beatboxer?
Yeah,
And so,
totally.
would you talk a little bit about how you've been able to take these incredible ideas and make them accessible?
Such a great question. And that is so much about what we are, as musicians, what we are tasked with is to, we're actually translators in a lot of ways. And the notation we choose to use, or that we grew up using, or that, um, is asked of us by the institutions we learn in, they're sort of, I mean, they're so vastly important, but they are also, they're kind of blunt tools. Like so figuring out how to make some of this work is yeah, you get
The way that you just said that is like all of my best music theory teachers have said similar concepts,
yeah,
that these are the tools, just some tools, not
yes,
all of them.
not all of them, right. And so yeah, and so I love this. I love talking about this because again, I come out of, and I've worked with pop musicians and folk musicians and people who have never looked at a piece of music, sheet music in their lives, and are at the top of their game musically. And so, yeah, how to translate this into um, the training that we all share as choral practitioners, that is very important to me. And it's also a frustration, and it takes a lot of time. Um, but I appreciate trying to do that translation, which is kind of how I think of it. So, for instance, in Bello, that was such a process to get that from what I built in the studio, which you're right, was a series of loops, and to make something that wasn't horrific to look at. That took a while, actually. Um, and like to catch all the details but not too many of them, it was a real distillation process. I'm trying to think of a concrete thing to tell you. Well, for instance, all the percussion in the track on the original album in Unzip the Horizon, very complex, and I just played a lot of things in the studio. We couldn't capture that in the choral. It was just impossible to capture that. So I had to, it took several months, actually, I would say even a year, and I'm still revising to find the way that an ensemble can do that. Divide us into two groups. Well, originally I through composed the percussion parts, like it was something you read and it changed every verse. Way too much. Some ensembles valiantly tried, but it's just a kind of simplify is a big part of this process. Totally worth it.
That's so fascinating to hear you talk about having to condense or simplify your own musical thoughts in a way to make it approachable and attainable for a choral ensemble. Because when we receive sheet music as educators, I feel like we look at it and we do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And then there's an additional layer of translating, as you say, because then we have to determine, great, now how are we going to give this to the group in a way that makes sense, that is logical, that hooks them in,
Yeah.
and that doesn't overwhelm them. And that can be such a challenge.
It is such a challenge, and I salute every teacher who attempts this. It's incredibly hard. And you have a gift at it. It really is. It's a skill, it's a craft, but it's also a passion, to make that translation possible.
And the links though, that you offer, I think are so beautiful because, like you mentioned at the beginning, sometimes in high school choir, getting students to be as passionate about polyphony as they are about other things can be a challenge. And it's really neat, I think, to be able, my favorite type of programming is when we can take two items that appear to be so distinctly different, yet at the root really are they? And then those techniques that you can use that can be the through line are so powerful. So I think all the simplification that you have done has really brought so many teaching elements into the classroom that we can expand upon, and so much that can be done by rote, but also let's unpack this really cool rhythm. And then, oh my gosh, look at this piece from the Renaissance. It's all coming together. So
Yes. Oh, I love that. Oh, and that is actually for me kind of a miraculous thing that you do as makers of programs um on the regular with kids, because I don't have that regularity in my life of doing that, so the way that I see my music and other music woven together is sometimes like a miracle to me. I just my mind is opened every time. So thank you.
And now, a quick word from our sponsors.
Hey everyone, Gloria here from Call Time Clothing, back again to remind you to check out our newest special edition items from our collaboration with Conductor. Grab a super soft tee for yourself, a family member, teacher, or maybe all of the above. We've truly got something for everyone. Head over to Call Time Clothing today.
and we're back.
Happy to do it. I'm very happy to include your works.
Thank you. Yeah.
I have a logistical question for you, Moira, which is just, did you study composition formally at any point, or has this all just been your personal musical journey that has taken you from a singer and then piano performer and then now performer slash composer slash incredible clinician, like all of the things? What was that journey like?
That's a great question. So, pretty much no to the formal compositional education. I, as a teenager, I took a few composing lessons from a professor of music that was near to where I grew up. And that was helpful. Kind of gave me that sense of, the tradition, I guess, of being a composer, but I would not have assumed that title for a long time. And actually, I've sort of thought, what is a composer? Because in a way, I think everyone is actually, you guys are composers too, And so that idea of the lone person sitting by themselves with a genius cloud of notes above us. I mean, that's a beautiful tradition, but I also think that composition happens in so many ways, and I really would call the other ways composition as well. So, no formal composing, a lot of improvising in my kind of sprinkled throughout my singing career, and that really helped. I'm still somewhat of a shoot from the hip, listen well and respond to the moment kind of music maker. So, and I think my preferred way of composing would be in that more improvisational mindset, or I would say that improvisational body state. I think that's my preferred way. And it's only been in the last, I would say, 6 years that I've been sitting at a computer more, in my computer and my piano, which is right over here, and doing it that way. So, and different stuff comes out of you when you do that. So I think that's the answer to that question. And absolutely, arranging of folk music was sort of an era for me. I've always written music, but that was sort of more important while I had a vocal group that was really regular when I lived in Los Angeles. And then when I stopped having a regular band and did various collaborations, then my writing and my performing life actually started to separate a little bit more. So I was singing lots of things that I was never writing down. And then I was writing down more things for other people to sing.
Wow, that's so interesting to think about. I mean, your life just as a musician is so unique. Like you are, I mean, I was so thrilled when you said yes to be on here because I was like, she's amazing. Like she's an incredible performer and and composer, and you have so many facets of you that all come through in your compositions, I think. But
Thank
it's
you.
so neat and probably inspiring for people to hear about somebody who is like, yeah, I was a pianist and I'm still am, but I also sing in a pop band and I'm composing choral music. And
Yeah.
I mean, you're so multifaceted, and I think there are a lot of musicians out there who can relate to that feeling. And I
Yeah.
love that you made it happen. You're making it work.
Thank you for saying that. And I think that is the new way paradigm, because the recording industry and making money from it has really shifted, as we know, and the academy has shifted. The sort of institutions that employ people that are coming out of school, that's really shifting a lot. So I think we are all ready and on the alert for how to do this in a real world way. So I try to be honest and teach what I know of making a path that's pretty strange.
But I think the flexibility too that you just talked about is the trait that if I'm to teach anyone anything, that would be what I would hope to leave as the imprint. I
Yeah.
think that sometimes when we're thinking about academia and the structures within, we put people in these columns and
Yeah.
pillars.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you know Sharonova at all. That yeah.
I
So
do.
what a goddess.
She's a total goddess. I was just
Yeah.
texting with her because, yeah, I asked her to produce a single that, anyway, that's more to come.
So cool.
She's amazing.
So
Total
she's
hero.
another person who I think like I think of you two as if I'm going to guide students who are in composition or in choral music or opera singers or in the Baroque early music ensemble, listen to these artists and go to their websites and explore and look at their bios, because unlike what so many people are telling you, one way is not the right way. And there are so many paths and so many doors that are yet to be opened, especially
Yeah.
if you're game to say yes and to try new things.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. It's so wise and not. Yeah, I think we are collectively opening up to that, but it's still new, that way of thinking that you.
And along that journey, I would have to imagine there may be some battles and struggles with self worth and validation. And I wonder if you might be able to speak to that a little bit, and then maybe some advice you might have for others who are starting on this own journey themselves. And that would
Yeah.
just be anything you have to share would be great.
Oh, that's a brilliant question, and I'm not sure if I have much wisdom, but I think I have. I think what I have is recently. Let's speak about confidence. So confidence can sometimes come from ignorance, actually, because you've got your blinders on for a long time and you're very focused. And so from that comes a sense of purpose and forward motion, because you kind of have this one thing that you want to do. And that, I think, I somebody asked me where I got my confidence from, and I think it's that I had interest in sort of unusual things, and I had a path that I could see, that I thought was related to everything else, but actually was quite strange, right? And I say that with love. Um, but more recently, and especially as you sort of mix or become, compare yourself with others, you realize that actually the next stage of confidence comes with the knowledge that there is absolutely nothing gained by comparing yourself to anybody. Sure, look at other people, listen to other people, of course, but you cannot compare your journey and your output to somebody else, because it's just not going to be the same. Um, and to your point about confidence or self doubt, validation, um, I think the how would I say this? The need for it is there, unfortunately, but that um, drive that I have, no matter what, I'm going to be producing music. I can't help it, and um, and so I will figure out how to make that happen. And And so I guess I would just encourage anybody to do that. And what that looks like is unique to you. And that's good. I think the last thing I'll say is that I do believe in craft, uh, really more than ever. And I am sometimes jealous of somebody who is seems to me to be a little bit more focused than I, because I can sense a depth of craft in their work that I sometimes lack. I'm working on it always. But I think that's life too, so you sort of choose, um, again, going back to the very first thing we talked about. I'm an introvert that loves to be out in the world, traveling and connecting and making that sense of belonging for myself and for others through music, and a sense of action and taking care of each other. So that's what whatever makes that happen is what I'm going to do.
Oh, Maura, there were so many just nuggets of wisdom and joy in that response. And McKenna was like frantically typing quotes in here that we can use for later, because there was just so many things to absorb. And I loved your initial thought, which was about comparison. And it reminded me of this quote that I have no idea who said it first, but comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
And I've heard that before, and it is so difficult, especially as musicians and just as human beings, but as musicians in particular. I immediately think of like, okay, well, you're in high school and you want to be in the top group. So you're competing against 6 people and there's only 5 spots. And,
Yeah.
Especially I feel like as a soprano and like as a as a woman in our field, there are typically more opportunities for tenor and basses, and it's there's just a sense of like needing to be the best and push forward and have those blinders on to succeed. But then you leave that space and you realize how limiting that is. And I'm someone who does struggle sometimes to take the blinders off of my quote unquote end goal, which of course I have no idea what is actually going to look, what my life's going to look like. And I can dream about it, and that's healthy. But what's not healthy is to set those parameters and say, this is the only way to make it work. And if I don't get this, then I'm not good. And the more you value yourself and are patient with yourself and allow for that fluidity and that creativity, the better off you are. And that's something that we struggle with. And I struggle with for sure.
Yeah. And thank you for saying that. I think in music, I have also seen, as a woman, that I fiercely want to advocate for other women too, because there is, in a way, especially in singing, there are way more of us. Like that's just culturally what's happened. And so we need to fiercely defend and support one another. And so for instance, what you're doing here is so incredible. So thank you.
Thank
you. And like you said, women supporting women, we got to keep it going. And so if you're out there, give someone a high five.
Yes.
Or a hug or a coffee, whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
Because we need each other.
And now a quick word from our sponsors.
Pavon Publishing is proud to feature outstanding women composers and conductors.
Composer Judith Harrington has created a prolific choral series for youth and treble choirs that includes Fireflies from Japan and Duérmete mi corazón from Brazil.
Shirley McRae has many outstanding arrangements for young choirs, including popular songs like Black Sheep, and Sakura.
Conductor Iris Levine maintains a treble chorus series of medium to advanced works with text by poets from Teasdale to Yeats.
Other composers and authors in the Pavon family circle include Zenaida Stewart-Robles, Catherine Rundis, and Martha Wall. Explore all of these fantastic composers at Pavon Publishing. And we're back.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great segue into one of our big closing questions for the main interview portion, which, if there is a time that you can think of where you might have faced discrimination, specifically gender discrimination in the field, and if you might have suggestions for others who have either been in that situation or are maybe facing that now, or a time maybe you've seen that happen, and just some advice for those listening.
Oh man. Yes. I have. I've experienced that. And I'm sure you have too. And I think the instances that come to my mind where I have been devalued, or someone expects very little of me, or doesn't want me to succeed. Those are again, they're people who have a lot of fear, who are operating out of that fear and end goal thing that you were just talking about, Kira. Men and women. And I think, and a sense that the only way that we can do this is by dominating and not listening. And so I'd say the things I have had a recent experience in which I felt I felt very shut down, literally shut down. I think because I'm in this phase of being I'm coming into my out of my maidenhood and into my queenhood or motherhood phase, and maybe even heading into the crone phase, like these kinds of ideas of like what women are supposed to be and how much you get the yay is I'm feeling it. And I've had wonderful opportunities. So I would say that first. But second, I think it's real that you have to keep on calmly forgiving and sending love to the people that are going to try to shut you down. And I forget to do that sometimes. Like I was disrespected in a rehearsal, in a big kind of heavy rehearsal in front of a bunch of people in a sexist way. And I shut down, and I thought, I need to do better, with just being calm and being like, okay, it's okay that you feel you have to do that, but that's not detracting from my power, actually. And I'm going to take the space that I need to take. So I guess I would give myself and anybody listening to this permission to just take that breath and send love to the person who's not treating you well, and stand your ground. Yeah, I think that's really important.
Yeah, that was one of, I think, the most powerful answers we've heard yet in 3 seasons.
Great.
And so a practical, and for myself, and I can't speak for anybody else, typically my first place that I go to is Rage. And so, which doesn't bring out the best version of myself, I can attest. Right. But this is happening, not just in choral music. And I was listening to a podcast actually this afternoon on my way home to our podcast that was talking about the ratio of women that are sent home from the hospital who come in with heart palpitations that the doctor claims are not a heart attack, but are instead anxiety. Right. And there is a lawsuit going on around this malpractice, but because no one is validating that sensation, people are losing in court. So anyway, this is a tangent, but I heard that and I thought, although it's not a life or death situation, and so the rehearsal that you were saying, that we feel when the space is snatched or like removed, the carpet's pulled out from under, is a real feeling. And so if you're feeling that, let's pull out the gratitude and recognize that we are supposed to take this space. Yeah. Right.
Which is so difficult to do. And it really takes practice. So I encourage us all to practice it. Yeah. And because I think actually in that room, there's probably other people that are rooting for you to practice that.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, well, as soon as you started speaking, I started thinking about McKenna when you talked about taking a breath, because she is it's so funny to think about her being raged it's just hilarious because I am the angry one.
Mhm.
And it's so I'm someone who just from birth, I feel like I've been the like, yeah, I'm like an extroverted, like you gotta hype yourself up, and like I'm very much the person who's like, that's not right. What do we do?
Right.
And I'm quick to call it out. I'm quick to feel it. I'm quick to have the guttural reaction that I think a lot of men typically have.
Yeah. Mhm.
And McKenna is my role model for the kill 'em with kindness and
Mhm.
the taking a breath, and to ever hear her like talk, because we've been talking on the phone lately and she's been like, I'm just having these experiences and I'm feeling so angry, and I was like, I know, this is like I live there. I
Right.
live in that sun and that like fiery feeling in you that's like,
Yeah.
this is not right. And I've had to learn, that's a strength to
Yeah.
feel that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And there are situations where it is appropriate to step in and say, that's over the line.
Yeah.
And I think it's also fascinating to operate this world and be like, so I need to train myself to recognize that, yes, that is valid and this is wrong. And me addressing those
Yeah.
feelings by being calm is so much better and so much more powerful
Mm.
than me losing my power by externalizing those feelings in the wrong way. And
Yeah.
that is something that I will work on for the rest of my life.
Me too, girl. Yep.
Forever.
Yep.
And I think it's important that we do hear that we get these mixed messaging. It's like, okay, well, you
Mm.
don't think there's space for you? Great, stand up.
Yeah.
Go. You go, girl. Get
Yeah.
in there then. And there is that energy of like, then take the reins. Cool, I'm taking them. Let's go. And then there's also people who are saying, you don't have permission to take the reins and you need to sit back there. And there's this converse, like, how do we balance? How
Yeah.
do we balance that?
Yeah. It's
And I
really
don't have the
true.
answer.
Well, and also you'll feel the other things that you're going to feel from the decision to step forward. In this case, if you're being shut down, it's also that I think the practice for me is not, yeah, like you said, not getting spun into
Mm.
a sense of a lack of self-worth and the anger that goes with it. Um, and I think both that kill him with kindness and this sort of ferocity of like no um are can be as valid. They're both valid, I guess. But what you're saying, Kira, is that it's the feeling inside that's important, so that you don't
Yes.
get like pulled out of yourself the moment that somebody's really disrespecting you. And so yeah, it's and the validation may not come immediately for stepping up like that and being calm. Yeah.
But it's a generational shift, you know? And I think that's the work that's starting to happen and I think must continue. And when I think about generational changes, God, a generation seems so long. But like
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier, the person in the room that sees you respond in a way that still you're taking your space, you're being the leader, that shows the next person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah.
And in a kind way, in a way that's still, you can be both powerful and a good person to everybody who's in front of you. And that is really challenging for some people. And it's especially challenging when you're put in a position where no one is seeing you as that.
Yeah.
And so I hear you, Maura, and we love you and we support you, and we're sorry that rehearsal happened. And unfortunately, it probably won't be the last time, but
Exactly.
everyone is a practice.
Yeah.
And we can only do our best in that moment. So
It's really true. And I think part of what I'm coming into in this sort of mid 40s time is a sense of the imperfection of the world in general, that I've been such an idealist at heart. And that I think the choir world and music in general can kind of protect you and keep you in this relatively sort of a place of happiness. So we're not working in a hospital. We're not working in the police force. We're not working in so many other jobs in which people are at their worst, at their most chaotic. So we are in an environment of harmony a lot. But I think that having and acting in such a way that you mediate things that are not harmonious. And again, this goes back to singing bellow and bellowing as much as you sing a beautiful aria, and pure tone. Those things, like, we need to have more of these, that range within the work we do in choral music. Yeah, so I guess I'm working on that.
Thank you for all of that, Maura. That I just seen and heard, absolutely. And we will try and do the same. We know we have to let you go soon,
Yeah,
but we
unfortunately.
wanted to, which is very unfortunate. I could talk
I
to you
agree.
forever.
Likewise.
And now a quick word from our sponsors.
Hello, everyone. Jocelyn Hagan here. I just wanted to let you know that the Compose Like a Girl podcast has officially launched. Listen as I interview celebrated composers Sarah Kirkland Snyder, Chen Yi, Dale Trombor, Angelica Negron, Rina Esmail, and more. I'm also hard at work on the next batch of scores in the Compose Like a Girl choral series, distributed by Graphite Publishing. You can help me bring these new pieces to life. I'm always seeking choral ambassadors to perform these new works by emerging composers. If you're interested, please reach out to me, Jocelyn Hagan, via my website, jocelynhagan.com, or social media. I look forward to hearing from you.
And we're back.
But we do have really quickly for you a fast 5, and we will actually try to do it in 5 minutes. So our challenge is to keep it short, and you will try to do the same. So the first fast 5 question is, what is a favorite current choral, octavo, or composer recommendation?
I would say Kat Gimon's Fire. I just really appreciated it recently, and so that's what came to mind.
Snaps, and stay tuned because that's a little Easter egg for you all later.
What is one misconception about you?
There is complexity in my background, and I think we do this to each other no matter what, but just know that there's a complexity, and don't assume that it's all just sweets and daisies and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
Beautiful. What is one word to describe you? I'm just going to say as a musician because you're so multifaceted.
What is one word? Potent.
Ooh. Okay. Top 5 words. I love it. Ooh, that's so good. Potent.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm keeping it short. What is one favorite musical blooper that you might be willing to share with our listeners?
Oh, so many. I don't know. I have forgotten words. So the great Sinead O'Connor, who just left this plane, wrote a song called "In This Heart," and I was performing it with Jake Asaro, our friend, on a big stage, and I kept forgetting the words, and I couldn't remember them. And this was like a big festival stage, and it was deeply embarrassing. So that's a big blooper.
Oh, it's so nice to hear that you're human, Maura.
Oh, yes.
We have one more question for you, which is just, what is a favorite choral memory?
Gosh, so many. I have really enjoyed some choral experiences that are outside and at night. One festival comes to mind. It's called the Festival of Voices, and it's in Hobart, Tasmania, Australia. And there were some really big mass singings that hundreds and hundreds of people attended, and there was a sense of both ceremony and joy, and a little bit of that, I don't know what's going to happen, improvising, but also a collective listening that was going on. That, yeah, I just love and I want to do more of those.
Ugh, that's a beautiful moment. And I think a great reminder for all of us the power of travel and cross cultural exchanges. And
Yeah.
this whole episode, every time we say bellow, I had the opportunity to do some traveling this summer to Japan and get to
Wow.
see some of the summer matsuri, summer festivals. And there's a bellow that I want to share with you that I can't get out of my head just from listening to you talk. And it's ya ya do are the syllables, but the way that it's said in the community is ya ya do, and it's like this huge shout. And
Wow.
just thinking about you and the bellow, I was like, I was in this visceral bellow. But just the power of your music opening those doors, we're just forever grateful.
Oh, that's so cool. I want to hear more about this. Ya ya do.
That's it. And generational. So
Yeah.
from pre-K through 80s, 90s,
Wow.
100s. So we will bellow, ya ya do. We will be there for each other, and excited about this amazing conversation, and can't wait for our listeners to hear.
Likewise.
If you haven't checked out our social media, Kira's going to tell you about it.
We just want to thank you again, Moira, for your time and for coming and for talking to us. And also, I just want to brag that when Moira met our family at ACDA, I was like, I feel like you could be in our family. She was like, I was thinking that. I don't remember if you remember this, but you were like, I would happily, yes, I see it. We could all be sisters.
I agree. I do remember that. And I remember this sort of that floatingness of that moment kind of made some of these interactions, like with you guys, really memorable and fixed in my brain. Like you were saying, McKenna. Yeah. And so, yep, still feel it.
Honored.
Yeah.
So honored. And we're going to keep that in our memory box forever.
Yeah, likewise.
For our wonderful listeners, if you haven't seen our social media, please check us out. We are at conduct.her.pod on Instagram and TikTok. What? And Facebook.
Thank you for listening. This has been Conduct Her.
This episode was engineered and mixed by Mary Hannah Klontz, with intro and outro music by Jonathan Martin and ad music by Kate Krellin.
Discover more resources at conducther.com.